Welcome back to Bewitching Brain. We're so happy to have you with us and encourage you to share and subscribe. Take good care, be safe, and help others be safe. If you watched our series on the nimble neuron, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. Please see the video description for an easy 2-minute survey. Additionally, there is a short survey for this current series. If you could complete that as well, we would greatly appreciate it.
Welcome back to the Bewitching Brain. In our first video series, we learned all the ins and outs of the nervous system. From neurons to neurotransmitters, we discussed the basics of what makes your brain and body's nervous system work. If you missed any of these videos, feel free to go back onto our channel and see any of the nervous system introduction videos provided on our page. Now that we understand the basics of the nervous system, it is time to dive into our body's sensory system. You might be aware of your body's 5 main senses: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. But did you know that your nervous system is at the center of each of these senses? Within this next video series, we will be discussing each of your sensory systems and discuss the nervous system's integral role in helping you understand more about the world we live in. The way sensory information is relayed back to the brain starts with sensory receptors. Sensory receptors are specialized neurons that tell the nervous system something has happened. For example, there are sensory receptors called stretch receptors. Stretch receptors are a type of mechanoreceptor, and when the area around them is stretched, they send a signal down their sensory pathway. We can think of stretch receptors in your touch sense. Imagine running your finger across a piece of Velcro. When doing so, your brain needs to know that it is getting tugged on by what it is touching. Your skin is getting stretched by the piece of Velcro you are moving your finger across. Thus, your stretch receptors, known as Merkel's discs, on your finger will recognize this and tell your brain that what you are touching is stretching your skin. This is just one example of a sensory receptor. For more information, stay tuned for our next videos in our sensory system series. Now we know how sensory information starts this relay. But how does it make its way from your toes, tongue, or ears all the way to your brain? Well, to start, your sensory signal information is relayed from sensory receptors along sensory nerves to what are called ganglia cells. The most common type of sensory ganglion is called the dorsal root ganglion. This is because sensory information travels afferently, meaning arriving in your brain, on the dorsal side of your spinal cord. To think about what side of your body this would be, think about where a dolphin's dorsal fin is, and that would be your dorsal side as well. Your dorsal root ganglia refers to all the cell bodies associated with a specific sensory receptor. So in the case of our Velcro stretch receptor example, all the information from those sensory receptors gets relayed to their appropriate stretch ganglion. These dorsal root ganglia project onto your spinal cord, which then bring all of the sensory information to your brain to be further processed. Once the signal travels up your spinal cord and reaches the brain, it must travel through one more location before being processed in its appropriate location. This structure is called the thalamus. The thalamus acts as the sensory gateway into the brain. Every sense, except for your sense of smell, must travel through this structure. This relay station acts as another sensory stop in your sensory information marathon. Lastly, once your sensory information passes through the thalamus, depending on what type of sensory information is being relayed to the brain, it will be sent to a specific cranial location. To understand this a little bit better, we need to break down the brain into its 4 major lobes: the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes. Each of these lobes deal with specialized functions, and some of them even hold the primary sensory cortexes. When breaking down sensory information storage locations, our visual information is processed in our occipital lobe. This seems a bit odd because our eyes are at the front of our head, while the occipital lobe is at the way back of your brain. Auditory information is stored in the temporal lobe, which is right by your ears, so this one makes a bit more sense than your sense of sight. Your sense of touch, like when you feel a piece of Velcro, is stored in what is called the post-central gyrus, which is found within the parietal lobe. Your precentral gyrus in the frontal lobe is what holds your primary motor cortex, so your somatosensory and motor functions are often linked. This is advantageous as you might need to move your hand away from a burning flame once you feel it. Your sense of taste is mostly held in a structure called the insula. This is a bit different than the rest of the senses we've already discussed. And lastly, your sense of smell, the only sense that does not travel through the thalamus, is held mostly in your limbic system. This system is known to hold a lot of your emotional, memory, learning, and attention functions. This is why your sense of smell
is very linked to many emotions, like when you smell grandma's fresh cookies or raspberries on a summer day.
Next time, we will discuss in more detail how your body senses touch and pressure. Please join us.
Thanks for listening, Brainiacs. Tune in next time for more.